非常列表线。上。英米外长。第二祭司。亚美尼亚总统人。大型3总统。 印度总统莫迪 阿塞拜疆夫人 303公里。俄罗斯总统普京
Point number one. Point number two, Rahul, in fact, we were discussing yesterday also that how Putin, after landing, he spoke to Chinese media and said, and brought BRICS and spoke about BRICS unity, etc., etc. So, Rahul, one thing is very clear from what Foreign Secretary said yesterday, perhaps the statements, the readouts from the Indian side, that as far as tariff is concerned, this is something which India wants to handle this issue bilaterally with the United States. In fact, Indian side made it very clear that the meeting is not directed towards third country. In fact, Rahul, Brazilian President Lula has really been trying hard from last 1 month to get a joint statement from the BRICS leaders on Trump's tariff. But it appears that the Indian side has not shown interest in that proposal.
Yeah. This is a photograph that Mr. Ulyanov has tweeted, and he says, he's tweeted someone who says multipolarity is coming. Multipolarity is coming. And then Mr. Ulyanov goes on to say, we are witnessing the formation of a qualitatively new system of international relations. So this really is that photograph, and that photograph shows President Xi clutching the hands of Prime Minister Modi with President Putin looking on. And this is, of course, from the BRICS, I think, of last year. And it's from Kazan. And that's what I'm being told. And he goes on to then talk a little bit about the fact that we're seeing a new non-West collaboration, which means that India and Russia and China are going to continue to exercise their autonomy, diplomatic autonomy, economic autonomy, and of course, strategic autonomy. And I want to quickly go across to Professor Chileni on this. Professor Chileni, one can belabor the point that there are differences between these countries, but the optics are certainly going to play a part. Okay, we've just lost him, but Colonel Rohit Dev, let me bring you in. Yes, there are differences between India and China. We have come back after a prolonged period, a hiatus really, of a diplomatic breakdown, but the optics are sending a message. There is no doubt about that.
Rahul, I think it's beyond the optics now, because there are prudent decisions to be taken in geopolitical alignments. Like you mentioned, energy security, healthcare, pharma, trade has been on the table with Prime Minister Modi speaking to Egyptians, Maldivians, the SIA region presidents. And also, interestingly, he took out time for even a country, our neighbor and friend, Nepal as well. So you understand what Prime Minister is doing. He is trying to stitch the right chords to make sure that the energy security of India is taken care of in the long run. There are no pressures of the United States which can impinge that. B, as far as Sino-Indian is concerned, we both have no option but to mend a few fences and build a few new bridges as well. And I think that emanates from the common talk. Yes, both leaders will try to avoid their own, pain points of border tranquility. So that will be spoken about. But you heard the Prime Minister saying very clearly that for the last few years, we have been okay at the border in terms of maintaining peace. But that hawkish attitude, which has been there from both the sides for the last 4 years, will continue insofar as the border is concerned. So I don't think so there's going to be a resolution. And believe you me, I mean, having seen China for the last 30 years and been there, I think it's not in Chinese interest to resolve too many border issues with India as yet. And while they did it with the Russians a few years ago, to a large extent, it came from a position of power and strength. Currently, it is not looking at the same way.
Yes.
Cross-border part also takes a little bit of a comma and will not reach a full stop, is because there are Chinese interests in Pakistan. To be able to call out Pakistan on a stage like this directly will be a thing which probably the Chinese premier will not be able to say in so many words. But yes, the Prime Minister of India is at full liberty to talk about cross-border terrorism, to talk about bilateral trade, investments, and how the SCO can align for future trade, security, and energy needs as well. And put on that the caveat of healthcare and pharma, which is going to be a big thing in the future as well, given the fact that these patents from the Americans, 625 billion worth, will go down in a year and a half. And China and India are going to be the major players there as well. And these are the benefactors. And also, I think there is a stitch in line for the 75th year of our diplomacy. Right.
Yes.
Please.
That's right. And that has been also referenced. And I'm glad that you sort of led on to that, because I just want to draw our attention, viewers' attention, to this cartoon that has appeared in the China Daily. And this is front-facing the editorial that is also playing on what Colonel Dev was saying. So here you see doves, the trade dove, the peace dove, and the energy security dove, and the cooperation dove, all of them being released by the Chinese people and other world leaders at the SCOs. So very interesting that the Chinese are leveraging this platform to send a message that they are part of the solution and not the problem, as we're seeing right now. And it's America that is actually sticking out as a country that is becoming a part of the problem. So it's interesting how the scales in PR terms are turning as America resorts to hard power, which is what she was doing a few years ago. And now, of course, the Chinese are resorting to soft power, which the Americans were adept at all this time. And here you can see is the headline: Neighbors Cooperative Pas de Deux will be salient boom for Global South. And
Kristen Chenoweth. Oh, it's Chenoweth. Is that messy workflow? I have goosebumps right now.
You are sitting underneath the air conditioning vent.
Oh yeah.
Feeling creative, so I load up Adobe. Yeah, nothing rhymes with Adobe.
Amazing, Mr. the Rapper. Is the video necessary?
I'm not sure.
May I assist it? Save me from the absolute. Yeah! So very clearly, the optics here are very redolent with a high sort of wax that is being put on this particular summit, and also, of course, this meeting. So it's very fascinating. There is, of course, this cartoon, and then there is this editorial, and then, of course, you have this massive photo spread, and you have on the back of that the meeting with Prime Minister. So getting a lot of prominence. Clearly, the Chinese are also now beginning to think that they need to be more invested, perhaps, with India, because in the long run, it will only be a win-win, as President Xi has said. But of course, all of that will be measured really by Chinese actions. As I said, one of the interesting aspects of the SCO, viewers, is that it was founded in Shanghai in 2001, and the SCO has adhered to the Shanghai spirit, a set of principles centered on mutual trust, mutual benefit, equality, consultation, respect for diversity of civilizations, and pursuit of common development. Here there are two or three contradictions, because mutual trust can only come when a neighboring country makes it a point to try and ensure that the territorial integrity of its neighbor is maintained and respected, and that the internal affairs of that country are not impinged upon. Well, the Chinese have not respected India's territorial integrity. They constantly make claims on Indian territories, on Indian states. And as you also know, as far as the Brahmaputra is concerned, which is known as the Sangpo, on the Chinese side of the fence, they are working right now as we speak on a massive hydroelectric project, which is bigger than the world's largest, which also happens to be on the Yellow River in China, called the Three Gorges Dam. So, and river, as you know, diplomacy is acquiring a criticality of its own. We've seen how India has leveraged the IWT to put additional pressure on Pakistan. So as long as China continues to sort of impinge on India's territorial integrity, it becomes a problem as far as building mutual trust is concerned. And of course, respect for diversity of civilizations and pursuit of common development, that's also problematic, because Pakistan is in the room and it looks upon India-Pakistan ties zero-sum game. The Pakistanis have a revanchist view of India's civilizational history, etc., etc. But we'll very quickly be bringing you footage, the opening footage really of the plenary session that is going to begin any moment. The Prime Minister will be speaking. His remarks will be extremely important. He will focus on terrorism, something that, of course, Pakistan will wince at, viewers, because the Pakistanis have used an insidious ploy to bleed India through 1,000 cuts that Colonel Dave was also talking about. So all of that coming together, these pictures, viewers, will be obviously supplemented in just a few moments with the Prime Minister's arrival and then him taking the stage after introductory remarks by President Xi. So we're expecting that to happen. Remember, this time there are a large number of outreach countries too. So you have 20 countries, which is a big number, and 10 international organizations to consolidate consensus, cooperation, and promote the spirit of the SCO. We'll take a very short break, viewers. When we are coming back, we're going to bring you some of those inputs. Don't go away.
Brought to you by... This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
That's a very important and consequential statement coming out from the Indian side. Differences should not be allowed to turn into disputes. It's been said before, but also a very important phrase, which was that we don't see each other as rivals. Both countries have said this. Of course, it's easy to get swept away by the rhetoric, but it does appear that China is also coming to this conversation with an open mind, as so is India. And of course, in the backdrop is Trump's tariff tyranny. and his view of the world, which is extremely unilateral, that puts America center and first, and expects America and expects India and China and other countries to sort of conform to his very, very unitary view of geopolitics. But right behind me is this center, which is already throbbing with activity. I'm just going to ask our VJ to look across from us, because we can show you these pictures, very consequential pictures. Why? Because in just a few moments, the 25th meeting of the Council of Heads of States of the SCO, as well as the SCO Plus members, will be meeting. This was, of course, founded in Shanghai in 2001, and the Shanghai spirit kind of underpins the cooperation that the countries strive to achieve here. There are 10 permanent members or full members, and these 10 members include India. India, of course, came in a few years ago at the very same time that Pakistan joined the STO as a full member. Before that, we were observers. But the reason we are starting here and not outside that beautiful building is because that has been locked down. This entire area is been locked down. There is a security grid in place because Prime Minister Modi is expected here in the next 10 or 15 minutes, after which there will be once again a bunch of speeches. Prime Minister will have... Welcome back. Very quick update. We're just hearing that the SCO leaders have begun to arrive at that meet venue, which is right next to us, just across the street from us. And the Prime Minister is going to be addressing that gathering very shortly. I want to go straight across to Siddhant. Siddhant, what can you tell us about this? The pictures coming through now.
Well, that's right, Rahul. In fact, in some time from now, the plenary session of the SCO summit will commence, and Prime Minister Modi will be delivering a strong message on cross-border terrorism, Rahul. And Rahul, as you were pointing out, India's relations with China, and India made it very clear yesterday that it is not directed toward any third country. So it's very important to put out India's position as far as tariff issue is concerned. To the best of my understanding, India so far wants to handle it bilaterally with the United States. In fact, President Lula of Brazil has tried to get a joint statement from the BRICS country to condemn Trump's tariff. Perhaps India has not shown much interest in that proposal. At the same time, yesterday also, when Prime Minister Modi met President Xi, both leaders discussed regional and global issues. In fact, Foreign Secretary yesterday highlighted that tariff was not discussed in detail. The global and regional issues were indeed discussed, but also both sides discussed how to navigate this this emerging economic challenge. As far as Russia, China and India trilateral is concerned, Russia has really been trying Rahul, the most important thing, perhaps what I could understand, could be Prime Minister's message on cross-border terrorism, because this would be for the first time that Prime Minister would be speaking at a multilateral forum after Operation Sindoor. And perhaps let's not forget that Pakistani Prime Minister Shabbash Sharif will also be there on the table. So we could expect, and perhaps all eyes are going to be on Prime Minister Modi's address to the plenary session of SCO summit, where he could give a strong message on cross-border terrorism.
Right. Thanks indeed for that quick update. Let me bring in Professor Chireni. Thanks very much, Professor, for being up so early in the morning and joining our broadcast. William Yang, researcher and analyst, Northeast Asia at International Crisis Group, also there with us. Colonel Rohit Dev, defense expert. Thank you for making the time so early in your days. Professor Chireni, how do you view the Prime Minister's interaction at the SCO and India's own association with this organization?
Well, for Prime Minister Modi, being at the SCO provides an opportunity to meet with some key partner countries. For example, the Central Asian states. He met with the military leader of Myanmar. Myanmar is a very important neighbor of India. Historically, it has been a peaceful neighbor, never posed a security threat to India. So the SCO is serving as a useful platform for the Prime Minister to exchange notes with key countries, including with China. And of course, today's meeting with President Putin is very important because Russia and India have an enduring partnership that has withstood fundamental changes in the world. This is one of the most enduring partnerships between any two countries in the world. And I think that partnership will continue to remain strong in the coming years. But as you know, Rahul, that
Mr. Joshi, Mr. Hiren Joshi, and there are others, of course, and the entire group of interpreters are at the back. So the Prime Minister making that address from his position, and in just
குறைவான கேபிட்டல்னா குறைவாக வாங்குவதல் என்று பொருள் அல்ல. Done in MTF உடன் 4x மார்ஜின் வரையிலான ஸ்டாக்குகளை நீங்கள் வாங்க முடியும். அதுவும் just 12.49% per annum என்ற விலையிலிருந்து தொடங்குகிறது. 1500 பிளஸ் ஸ்டாக்குகளிலிருந்து தேர்வு செய்து அன்லிமிட்டெட் ஹோல்டிங்கை பெற்று மகிழுங்கள். இப்போதே Done in MTF ஐ பயன்படுத்துங்கள்.
Investments in the securities market are subject to market risk. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.
Especially cross-border terrorism. So you have the Prime Minister there talking. And in just a short while, viewers, we're going to get you that feed. The audio will come shooting through. And I just want you to get a sense really of this hall. And you can see everyone's turned to the screen. Everyone's listening very intently to what the Prime Minister is saying. I'm a little further away, so I'm not very close to the speaker. But right there in the foreground, you can see a large number of journalists from other countries noting what the Prime Minister is saying. There's a long shot now, and you can get a better sense of where the Prime Minister is sitting. So you can see straight on around, if that were a clock, then the Prime Minister is at about 1 o'clock in that clock. And that's where he's seated, and that's where he's speaking with members of the Indian delegation. And he's addressing this entire hall. And from the indications that we are getting, the speech is going to be focused on terror. Let me also quickly bring in Siddhant on this. Siddhant, you've been speaking to MEA insiders. This speech would have been prepared, keeping a large number of cues.
Become the part of joint declaration if joint declaration happens.
Well, these pictures, as you can see, viewers, have been first broadcast into the media center here in Tianjin. And therefore, you're not getting a live feed still. That'll be deferred live. And it'll come to you in a few moments, and you're going to see a lot of people sort of crossing, and that's because this is a busy media terminus where that's, of course, the family photograph. But this has been, of course, put out now officially, so you can see.
So a part of the SCO grouping, and we've seen how Iran had been hammered by the United States just days ago. So yes, this is indeed, as President Xi said, a new setting of international relations.
Well, India has to, of course, be well within its own guardrails. It realizes that there are fault lines and it can't be seen as anti-West. So India will have to navigate these waters carefully, and that's why it's very important to hear what the Prime Minister has to say, and we're going to be bringing it up for it. So
then stay on. So then, fantastic. So General Pandey is with us and Professor Swaran Singh with us. General Pandey, Rahul is on ground. He's spoken with Chinese reporters, senior reporters from CCTN. He's looking at the China Daily. He's also tracking what's happening. And these pictures speak for themselves. Professor Swaran Singh and General Pandey, good morning and Jai Hind. General Pandey, your thoughts first up.
Yeah, good morning. And firstly, I could see Rahul, his eyes are looking actually tired, right? While he's very used to holding nights and nights after nights. And we saw it during Operation Sindoor time. But, coming to this point here, this SCO, the bilateral issue, very unfortunate that today India has got a great chance to project itself, because Modi is the only one in that entire SCO meeting who's not hemmed except for the tariff which has come from and we look at it as an opportunity. It is very important for him to show success in this meeting because of his internal pressures and the external environment which is pushing him into a corner because he stepped out too early, too fast, right? In a variety of, on the territorial part, on the land borders, on the seas and everything. And of course, the debt and so that is one part. Look at Putin, though. The second most important person in the SCO, when it was actually formed, was Putin. And both, it was China-centric, but both were very important players. Russia is again today into one corner and is fighting with its back behind the wall. Possibly the entire Western environment is against this one individual, not even, I'll say, the country. The only person who's there has got some power, say, is Modi. But what is happening? The media today is watching how many minutes of meeting happened. 40, 55, 60, 61. So it is a pressure on Modi, Prime Minister, to come back with some very credible outcomes, which doesn't happen because the outcomes have already happened. This was 1 year long process, started October last year. 10 months have passed. Number of things have happened in 10 months for actually continue to engage with China. So you have de-escalation having taken place, disengagement having taken place. You got with the Wang Yi coming in, Mount Kailash Yatra had already started. 2-3 very important parts have already been put across. But everybody is now focusing on the security part of the bilateral and SCO, which is going to be extremely difficult. Please look at everyone. There are about 24 players, the leaders who are there. 10 of the member countries, 2 of observers, and 14, I think, are 12 or 14 are the dialogue partners or something like that. Each one of them has got a conflict going either on the border or within the country. Are they challenged? You look at Myanmar, you look at Pakistan, you look at
Azerbaijan also.
All of them are conflicted. So while internal and external dynamics are playing there in terms of security environment, the Indian media and the political establishment is asking Modi to focus only on border, right? And our border issue, and unfortunately, I am coming from the military background, so possibly it may not be very palatable to everybody. But I look at it that should he hold hostage development of 1.4 billion people to what niggles we continue to have on the border, or else we continue to prosper and progress. And I think I've spoken on your channel and of course with Rahul also, when big nations talk to each other, they continue to stab, parley, use weapons, do side shows and inner shows.
That is geopolitics.
That is geopolitics. But they continue to engage in terms of trade. Look at US and Russia. In spite of last three and a half years, the trade continued without anybody knowing or talking of it.
Correct.
While they may hold you hostage as India, because Trump wanted to be nominated for Nobel. But the fact of the matter is, Putin came out on the stage and said, in last 8 months, 20% of trade has gone. EU is engaging with Russia while pumping Ukraine with arms and this thing. So when you want to arrive as a big nation, responsible nation, you have to understand that you need to shake hand, continue to shake hand while continue to do other things in the business. Security gets subsumed in trade and commerce, which is larger requirement for 1.4 billion people of our country. So weaponizing is not only trade is getting weaponized, technology is getting weaponized very
Actively and fast,
actively. And even politics. Please understand, with the Soros things happening, and you see what yesterday Navarro made mention about India, that Brahmins are making money, and
this is a typical Soros narrative, or even the the deep state, Soros-backed deep state entering into the White House. It's a very interesting turn of events, but it also highlights, General Pandey, the desperation. How is the American reaction being? Rahul is here. So how is the American reaction being read on ground, Rahul, by the grouping that is present there in Tianjin? How are they reading the way the Americans are reacting? And then Professor Swaran Singh, I'll bring you into this. Yes, Rahul.
Well, I've been interlocuting with, of course, ME officials, and at this moment, they don't want to comment on somebody like Navarro, specifically because of the tone he's chosen. I think General Pandey has made some very interesting comments there. But the Indian government has made it very clear that right now, they're not going to take the bait. They're not going to get into that. Trump loves theater, and he wants to give himself an opportunity to react in a manner which others will not be able to, counter. So he's itching for New Delhi to perhaps be provoked enough, take the bait, and say things that he can seize upon and position as, look, India being unreasonable. But I can tell you that there has been a huge conversation in this particular hall amongst journalists, and some of them come from countries where it is state media. So they are really the spokespeople for their countries, and they talk about how India has shown the way, that Prime Minister Modi has shown the way to the rest of the world, how to actually conduct diplomacy at a time when America is flexing hard diplomatic power. It's a strange inversion, because over the last few decades, it was the Chinese that were exerting hard diplomatic power, and there was a term for it also. But it's the Trump who is now borrowed or taken from the Chinese rule book, given up soft power and adopted this hard as he's going into the world and trying to dictate terms. But these are the pictures, and just look at these pictures. These are being now put out by government. So this is a deliberate attempt at sending out a message, Anand, and these pictures show you the three leaders. And look at this long deliberation between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi. If this is not going to get Washington's goat, then nothing else will. And that just happened a few moments before they lined up for that. But there's Prime Minister Modi who strides in, and you can see that all the two leaders first engage in a sort of deep conversation, and then guess who comes in? And this triad could have been with others, but it wasn't. It was only these three leaders that actually met. So this would have been coordinated also, perhaps. And this message is going out, and the interpreters then follow in to basically translate for everybody. And there's such ease here of body language, despite the differences. I mean, we're coming off the Galwan Heights, the chill at the Galwan Heights, but look at the ease.
True. We'll do a deep dive on that in just about 2-3 minutes. Let's just get Professor Swaran Singh in and his thoughts. From the India point of view, Professor Saab, even Bharat has a point to prove. Bharat is, facing the highest amount of tariffs in this region, perhaps, or among the current set of nations. After China, Bharat has been singled out. There is a huge pressure coming in from the West. On the other hand, we are coming at the back of not interacting with China directly in the last 7 years. And we are on the cusp of a growth story. ये बस मिस हो गई तो हम पूरा मिस हो जाएंगे. That's how critical this is, the next 5-7 years. So from Bharat's point of view, what is our net takeout beyond the optics? We'll come back to the optics in a bit, but yes, strategically.
I think seriously, China can be a useful partner if we can cultivate and manage the irritants. In that sense, already a lot of conversations are already taking place, as you know, between various Indian private companies to look for joint ventures with the various Chinese companies, and we are in fact facilitating and relenting on our tightening of regulations on Chinese investments. We have already been easing the visa again, first with technical staff, now even with managerial staff of Chinese nationals. The trade is sought to be balanced by encouraging China's production in India under Make in India for Make for the World, etc. So because China is a world leader in manufacturing sector, between 30 to 34% of global manufacturing happens in China. and currently 2 to 3 dozen sectors in technology where China is taking a world lead even over United States, can potentially be something which India can use in this coming decade to catapult its manufacturing sector. You would remember same was the story of China. China was producing and sometimes still continues to produce for Western companies. At some stage, experts used to say China's world trade actually is only 44% Chinese. Rest is all Western trade produced in China and going around the world. So that kind
ट्रांसफॉर्म के मूल मंत्र पर आगे बढ़ा। कोविड हो या वैश्विक आर्थिक अस्थिरता, हमने हर चुनौती को अवसर में बदलने का प्रयास किया। हम लगातार वाइड रेंजिंग रिफॉर्म पर काम कर रहे हैं। इस देश में विकास के साथ साथ अंतर्राष्ट्रीय सहयोग के लिए भी नए अवसर खुल रहे हैं। मैं आप सभी को भारत की विकास यात्रा से जुड़ने के लिए आमंत्रित करता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, यह खुशी की बात है कि एससीओ भी समय के अनुरूप इवॉल्व हो रहा है। ऑर्गेनाइज्ड क्राइम, ड्रग ट्रैफिकिंग और साइबर सिक्योरिटी जैसी समकालीन चुनौतियों से निपटने के लिए 4 नए केंद्र बनाए जा रहे हैं। हम इस रिफॉर्म ओरिएंटेड माइंडसेट का स्वागत करते हैं। वैश्विक संस्थानों में रिफॉर्म्स के लिए एससीओ सदस्य आपसी सहयोग बढ़ा सकते हैं। संयुक्त राष्ट्र की 80वीं वर्षगांठ के अवसर पर हम एक बार होकर यूएन रिफॉर्म का आह्वान कर सकते हैं। ग्लोबल साउथ की आकांक्षाओं को आउटडेटेड फ्रेमवर्क में कैद रखना भावी पीढ़ियों के प्रति घोर अन्याय है। नई पीढ़ी के बहुरंगी सपनों हम पुराने जमाने की ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट स्क्रीन पर नहीं दिखा सकते। स्क्रीन बदलने की होगी। एससीओ मल्टीलेटरलिज्म और इंक्लूसिव वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर का मार्गदर्शक बन सकता है। मुझे खुशी है कि इस महत्वपूर्ण विषय पर आज एक स्टेटमेंट जारी किया जा रहा है। एक्सेलेंसी, हम सभी पार्टनर्स के साथ समन्वय और सहयोग के साथ आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। मैं एससीओ के अगले अध्यक्ष किर्गिस्तान के राष्ट्रपति और मेरे मित्र प्रेसिडेंट जपारोव को शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
So Prime Minister Narendra Modi there speaking about security, connectivity and opportunity, and underlining and mentioning the Pahalgam attack there, saying that security and separatism are two big concerns. And Rahul, somewhere it looks like his office is already anticipating what the opposition would say. There are a lot of memes, a lot of jibes. The Congress has tweeted, Jairam Ramesh has said, Prime Minister Narendra Modi Bharat has been accusing China of its double standards and double speak on terrorism. Now Prime Minister tells President Xi that India and China are both victims of terrorism. If this is not so-called the elephant capitulating before the so-called dragon, then what is it? And then they further asked about Operation Sindoor and the fact that will President Xi be questioned about China openly helping Pakistan. But the Prime Minister has spoken about both terrorism and separatism affecting nations and affecting security. And Xi Jinping saying interference will not be tolerated.
Yeah, more than that. I mean, in this particular address, you just heard the Prime Minister saying connectivity that bypasses sovereignty loses credibility and trust. This is a straight message to Beijing on President Xi's face in full hall, where he says that, and remember, BRI passes through Aksai Chin. So, the Prime Minister also yesterday has been very, very forthright on where India stands on terror. This was communicated. In fact, if you read the fine print of the MEA release on the conversations, terror, cooperation in regional terror, all came up. Even the tricky issue of international terror financing was brought up. The entire larger context that you just pointed out, and most importantly, if we think that China doesn't take a strident position in Kashmir, for example, we told them very clearly that we see Taiwan not in the same framework as the Chinese do. So, I mean, what more plain speaking? You see, Rahul Gandhi's foreign policy obsessions cannot become the obsession of the nation. If he wants the Prime Minister to stand there and, sort of roll up his sleeves and make comments like Trump and Navarro are doing, well, that's not the Prime Minister's style. India doesn't descend to the level of gutter diplomacy. We keep it, we take the high road, we address issues in a manner, and this is true. I mean, who came up with the phrase Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai? It wasn't the Prime Minister. This was Nehru's legacy. It was Nehru who went blindsided into a relationship only to be jilted. Other Prime Ministers have made concessions to Pakistan on terror. Have we forgotten Sharm el-Sheikh? Have we forgotten Dr. Manmohan Singh? Have we forgotten the inertness of the Congress-era UPA government after 26/11? So, I mean, I don't want to get into, a particular sort of diatribe and get into this sort of narrow political sort of point scoring that the Congress is habitually now beginning to sort of pull up. I can understand that obviously it has come out of a period of sustained iciness between the two countries. We know that Galwan was the hiccup. I think the Prime Minister and others have conveyed. And remember, this outreach was begun in Kazan, not by the Prime Minister. This began from President Xi's office, from his desk. And we have only followed. And we have decided to take China at face value. And in any case, effective backroom diplomacy between the two sides has resulted in at least a process of disengagement. Yes, there has been no redeployment as such. We still have 50,000 troops, and that question was asked. But it's an ongoing process. Let's give it time. At least they've agreed to having transparent mechanisms. So,
but in the modern day, look at America and China. America and China, they are up against each other when it comes to security and when it comes to the arms race. But they are also engaged in each other, that both are buying each other's debt and both are so heavily invested in each other in terms of trade. So somewhere nations have to look at this separately. The other part that you said very clearly, that Bharat does not descend to a gutter level diplomacy, because you get into the gutter, you get your gireban dirty. So that's something which Bharat has also avoided, General Pandey. This whole talk, and also this whole talk about Russia, India, China coming together, they've come together here. But there is a lot more before a trilateral meeting happens. There is a lot more before just the RIC bloc comes. The other thing we got to see is, we are not against the West. Bharat is not saying we will stop engaging with the United States or we'll stop engaging with anybody else within the US administration or in the West. Bharat has a problem with what Xi Jinping called out: bullying, weaponizing tariffs to the detriment of your own citizens and also to global trade. General Pandey.
That is while Rahul is totally on fire by using words like gutter and stuff like that, he's in total angry mode. But the bottom line comes out that I think this present government is actually behaving like punching above its weight in terms of engagement, what is required to be done. Look at the silence from the government of India towards what American Trump sidekicks are making statements in the public domain. Absolute silence. And in a cycle of 24 hours or 48 hours, you'll just have a MEA statement coming out and either negating or affirming or maybe condemning, just single liners. But please understand, coming from a military professional, it is important to understand that niggles, challenges in borders, in exports, imports of defense equipment to your enemy nation cannot stall larger progress, right? We are behind the curve from China, from the world, at least about a decade and a half, 2 decades. We are into a catching up mode. Today, what do we require from China, which we aren't getting from the West?
Correct.
We need the tech. We need that FDI and telecom sector, which is dying. We require the rare earth, the magnets which are available with the Chinese. We require the technology for tunneling. We require anti-dumping laws to be effective. There are so many other facets which we need to continue to look at while we revive our pharmaceutical this thing. So who needs whom? Truly, today, actually, when you look at in the paradigm of trade and commerce and looking at the interest of 1.4 billion, we cannot continue to get into argument with what Jairam Navesh is talking of, that the Prime Minister was in double speak yesterday in the bilateral. So today the Prime Minister has come out so openly, brazenly, it cannot be much more
Vladimir Putin's message at the SCO. On the Ukrainian crisis, he said Russia adheres to the principle that no country can ensure its security at the expense of another. He's further added that the Western attempts to draw Ukraine into NATO are a contributing factor to the Ukrainian crisis. Putin also hails Bharat's role in resolving conflict, saying Russia highly values the efforts of China, Bharat, and other partners in resolving the situation in Ukraine. Rahul Shivshankar is joining us. Before Rahul speaks, viewers, please understand Ukraine means borderlands. And it was deemed or named Ukraine because it was supposed to be the border to the erstwhile Soviet Union. And one of the long-time issues for President Putin has been, even when Crimea was annexed in 2014, was the progression of NATO to eastward, despite there being no more Warsaw. Rahul Shivshankar, he's perhaps underlined the same thing again.
Yeah, but of course the context matters, and his views are completely taking on the United States from an SCO forum. So this is the first time we've heard any leader within the SCO speaking at the plenary session, making a direct reference to the manner in which America is sort of persecuting this entire effort at trying to engineer peace in Ukraine, saying that Russia will not be dictated to, number one. Number two, crediting India for making, including China, for making efforts to try and bring about a resolution of the crisis. Now, what has Donald Trump been saying? That India is actually part of the problem. It's not part of the solution. Here, Putin is saying India is part of the solution. And this is very, very crucial. I don't know if you saw this report, which was put out by, in fact, a Ukrainian oil analyst firm, energy analyst firm in Ukraine just yesterday, which suggests that Ukraine has upped its purchase of diesel from India by 15% in just 1 year. So India is keeping the lights on, the fires burning in Ukraine by supplying them fuel. So India is not profiteering for its own good. It is helping European Union, it is helping Ukraine and the citizens of these countries by making their lives easier so that their products are cheaper, so that inflation remains within a band that is tolerable. Without that Indian support, that would have been the end of the EU war effort, which is a combined war effort, let's not forget, against Russia. There's a unified front that Russia is up against. And it is always viewed, as you also said, that particular territory, which was named really after a Russian word called borderland, as a buffer zone between its sphere of influence and Europe's sphere of influence. And it's the Americans that started in 2000, or a little before that, in fact, to try and rope in Ukraine into the NATO sphere of influence, which was seen as a direct interference in the territorial sovereignty of Russia and its sphere of influence, and of course, an attempt to tilt the balance of power in Europe, which was seen as a massive provocation. And this was building up over the years. There was also regime change that was instituted by, in fact, the US and the NATO bloc in Ukraine. And it was known as a revolution about 15 years ago, which led to the emergence of people like Zelensky, who were seen as puppets by the Russians of the NATO cat's paw. But the fundamental point is the first allusion in the SCO, in Tianjin, amongst this forum of leaders, to the United States in direct terms, and that entire peace process, which was initiated in Alaska. It is actually Putin who is going to be spending an extended period of time. He hasn't spent this much time in any other foreign country as he will be in China, because he moves on to the Great Parade in Beijing, which is going to be celebrating the victory over the so-called fascist powers. So clearly now, Putin is positioning the SCO as an anti-American platform. India, of course, is going to be wary because it's the bridge, as General Pandey has been suggesting, between the West as well as, of course, the East. India has to be careful about not allowing this sort of formulation to lead to further antagonisms. It's got a great relationship with America just beyond the tariffs issue. There is a lot. In fact, just about a week back, there was a +2 conversation that went on between the two sides. So, look, Trump is an aberration. Hopefully, we'll be able to sort of see him off and we'll bring back this relationship to even keel. But in the meantime, we need to be careful about where we put our foot.
It's not the opening attack and the first 10 overs that the openers have to see off of on a test match, and you've got to survive that. This is another 3.5 years. So that lasts about half an hour to 45 minutes or maybe an hour, the first hour of play. But this is about 3.5 hours.
If he's not going in for another... I mean, Trump is a lame duck in the next 18 months as we go into what is known as a midterm.
So that's
his influence will wane. The courts are again railed against him.
Yeah, but he does not care at this time around because he's not looking for a return. But perhaps the likes of Vance and Marco Rubio, and they will all be worried because if there is a Republican continuance, then there has to be some amount of policy, and this is totally shaking things up. And the utterances of Peter Navarro today, last evening or this morning, are totally contrary to what the MAGA-based narrative is, and in fact, quite a sad state of affairs there, or maybe an indication that there are others who are now calling the shots within the White House, who have infiltrated even the Republican and the Oval Office at this point in time. Rahul, thank you for your thoughts. I'm just going to take it across to General Pandey and also Ashok Sajanar, and we'll circle back to you in about 15-20 minutes. So take that well-readed break, and then we'll come back to you, Rahul. Thank you for that. Amazing coverage from Rahul, Palki, the entire Network 18 team on ground in Tianjin. So kudos to them. Also, viewers, we have to understand, as I take it across to Ambassador Sajanar and General Pandey, in my very, very limited and humble submission, there are perspectives. When I traveled to Moscow, Ambassador Sajanar, I saw a perspective which is very different, not colored by Western media and Western narratives. It was purely from a Russian perspective and what Russia needed to do to survive and do for itself. Just like there is a Bharatiya perspective. There is a Western view of Bharat and there is a Bharatiya view of Bharat. Just like there is a Western view of what NATO is doing and there is a Russian view of what NATO is doing. NATO was formed historically to counter Warsaw. But there is no Warsaw for the last 20 years, 25 years plus. But NATO continues to expand. And this has been an issue. What is a Western entity doing right at the doorstep of Russia? If is Operation Sindoor in conducting Operation Sindoor, does Bharat become the villain? Or does Bharat become finally accounting for the number of atrocities and the cuts that Pakistan has tried to inflict on Bharat? That perspective, perhaps viewers need to understand that there are always two sides to the coin, and from where are you looking at? And President Putin has only been underlining this since 2014 and even before that, be it Obama, be it Biden, be it Trump, multiple times he said the same thing. You don't come to my doorstep. You stay away from me and keep Ukraine neutral. Don't get Ukraine into NATO. Let Ukraine be neutral. I won't interfere. You don't interfere and keep this off. This has been his position. And Russia needs the warm waters, the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. Otherwise, they have no way to trade because they are surrounded by ICCs on all the other borders that they have with the sea. Even on the other side, the Pacific, Alaska. This is geographical, sir. Please correct me if I'm wrong in my understanding of this. And then let's judge whether Putin is right or wrong in trying to invade and move into that region, Donbass, which has never been part of Ukrainian authority. They've had their own regime and they've had their own government and they largely speak Russian there. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anand. Your knowledge is very vast, boundless. So, you don't really need to be so modest and humble when you say that, is my understanding correct? Because I think everything that you have said is absolutely on the dot. And, this has been the challenge. not today, but it has been a challenge from a long time. And I will very quickly, share a personal experience also with you. This is the challenge that the news media, whether it is in print, whether it is electronic, whether it is now social media, etc., it is all dominated by the Western agencies. So, basically, it is the sort of echo chamber that you hear. All that they are saying, it is being repeated by the sister agencies and organizations. So that is what you will hear. That is what you'll hear about Bharat when you go out, because this is what I remember, in my travels now over the last several years, and particularly over the last 3.5 years. It is still the same question. Why is India importing oil from Russia? Why is India not condemning Russia? And you make all these arguments to them as to how India is helping out the global supply as far as in keeping the prices under control as far as petroleum products are concerned. But they will not be convinced. The personal experience I was telling you, Anand, was I remember in the 1980s when I went on my first posting to Moscow, and we had been really brought up on articles and writings in the Newsweek.
Oh, we've got a big update, Ambassador Sahab. I'm interrupting you. We've got a big update. We'll try and go back to Rahul also on this. The Tianjin Declaration of the SCO Council of Heads of States has been signed and adopted. Siddhant is just getting us this update, and this is big because the last time around the SCO did not agree. Bharat did not sign on the document because there were certain references, but now the Tianjin Declaration of the SCO Council of Head of States has been signed and adopted. That's the big update that's coming through. Akanksha Siddhant getting us these details. And this then becomes significant, Ambassador Sajanar. That means Bharat has signed the draft. Last time Bharat did not sign because there were certain references that Bharat took objection to. This time it looks like very clearly those references have been moved out. Ambassador Sajanar.
And references which we wanted as far as Pahalgam is concerned, possibly at least if either directly or tangentially, there is a reference to that. Because, last time also, Anand, your thousands of viewers and listeners should be careful that when India did not sign, when Bharat did not sign on the dotted line, that document was not accepted. It was not adopted. So, it works, SCO works by consensus. So this is what happened at the Raksha Mantri meeting, at the defense ministers meeting of the SCO countries. And when India objected and Mr. Rajnath Singh, he put his pen down saying, I'm not going to sort of, put my name onto this declaration.
Right.
The declaration went into the dustbin. It was not accepted. It was not adopted by any of the countries. So it's not as if India did not sign and the other countries went ahead with it. But this is important. Which means that, India's concerns on the issue of terrorism, they have been fully or adequately reflected as far as the declaration is concerned.
Right. I think we've just got a copy of the declaration. I'm going to check if we can get Akanksha or Siddhant to try and break this down for us on the wall. This is a long page, long discussion. The UN has, it speaks about the UN, it talks about the member states reaffirming, member states advocate respect for the right of peoples to independently and democratically choose their own paths of political and socio-economic development, reaffirming commitments to the goal of SCO principles, the Shanghai spirit, which embodies mutual trust, mutual benefit, equality, mutual consultation, respect for cultural diversity, and the pursuit of common development, and will consistently deepen cooperation in the interests of security, stability, sustainable development, and SCO region. So this is the first few pages, few lines that I am reading. The member states reaffirm universality, indivisibility, interdependence, and interrelatedness of all human rights, as well as their commitment to respect human rights and fundamental freedoms, and oppose the application of double standards in human rights issues and interference in the internal affairs of other states under the pretext of protecting them. So, and there is also a mention of drug trafficking. The members of the member states reaffirm their determination to continue the joint fight against terrorism, separatism, extremism, as well as against the illicit trafficking and narcotic drugs, psychotropic substances, and their precursors. arms smuggling, and other forms of transnational organized crime. So they have talked about drugs. Siddhant is joining us. Siddhant, Bharat has signed the Tianjin SCO document. It is important. Any mention of Pahalgam? I'm just reading through this document that you've shared, but it talks about separatism. It talks about terrorism, and it also talks about double standards, and non-interference. You can't interfere on the basis and giving bahana of human rights into the affairs of other countries, because that's also got to be respected. Yes.
Well, that's right, Anand. In fact, if you remember, when Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh went to China for the defense ministers' meet, at that point in time, the draft which was handed over to him did not had mention of Pahalgam attack, and perhaps that became the reason that India did not sign the draft, and there was no joint declaration. Now India has signed the draft, and the joint declaration has been adopted, and this joint declaration, in fact, we have managed to access the draft, and it very clearly says, Anand, that member states strongly condemned the terrorist attack in Pahalgam on 22nd April 2025. In fact, they expressed their deepest sympathy and condolences to the families of the dead and the wounded. They further stated that the perpetrators, organizers, and sponsors of such attacks must be brought to justice. Now, this particular line, Anand, perpetrators, organizers, and sponsors of such attacks must be brought to justice, is the line which was adopted by UN Security Council on 25th of April, right after the Pahalgam terror attack. The same line has been used in the SCO joint declaration. In fact, it is also important to highlight, Anand, that this particular draft declaration also mentions Jafar Express on 11th March and Khuzdar incident in Pakistan on 21st May 2025.
So the passage, so they mention Gaza, they mention Palestine.
To get, the whole organization pointing fingers at one of its own member states, So I think we should be happy, and we shouldn't really see Jafar Express and the other as a balance to this, that India has had to give in something. No, it's not a given by us, because neither has, Pakistan, of course, might be saying that India is involved in Balochistan and all, but the world doesn't buy it. But in this case, the world is quite cognizant that the cross-terrorism in India is basically coming from Pakistan.
No, but there's also condemnation of Israel's attacks on Iran. So there has been condemnation of that too. So how would you want to collectively view that? I'm just going to read it from the document, how the paragraphs have come, viewers, just for clarity. Yes, the member states strongly condemn terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, stress that double standards in the fight against terrorism are unacceptable, and call on the international community to combat terrorism, including cross-border movement of terrorists, with the central role of the United Nations by fully implementing the relevant UN Security Council resolution and UN Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy in accordance with the UN Charter and the principles of international law in order to jointly combat all terrorist organizations. They stress the importance of by adopting consensus and a comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. Member states strongly condemn the terrorist attack in Pahalgam on 22nd April 2025. Member states also condemn the terrorist attacks on Jafar Express on 11th March and Khuzdar on 21st May. They express their deepest sympathy and condolences to the families of the dead and wounded. They further stated that the perpetrators, organizers, and sponsors of such attacks must be brought to justice. The member states, while reaffirming their firm commitment to fight against terrorism, separatism, and extremism, stress the inadmissibility of attempts to use terrorist, separatist, and extremist groups for mercenary purposes. They recognize the leading role of sovereign states and their competent authorities in countering terrorist and extremist threats. Palki is also with us from Tianjin. Palki, Bharat also signing the document at SCO. What is your take on the document, and of course the overall reception that Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Bharat has got at SCO this time?
We'll start with the document. I would say it's a big win for India. It's something that India has been pushing for. Terrorism has been at the front and center of India's push for what the SCO should be doing and saying. And this is an organization that was set up to ensure regional security, among other things. And Prime Minister Modi, in his opening statements, also said that double standards on terrorism would be unacceptable. Remember, in the defense ministers' meeting earlier this year, India did not sign the joint statement. Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh did not sign it because there was no mention of Pahalgam, even though Balochistan, the train hijacking and the extremism was mentioned. So this is, I think, a big win for India. India pushed for it, and it found mention. Member states strongly condemning the terrorist attack in Pahalgam on April 22nd, 2025. Interestingly, it also says, Anand, that the firm commitment to fight against terrorism, separatism, and extremism, and stress that double standards will be unacceptable, calling on the international community to focus on this, attempts to use terrorist, separatist and extremist groups for mercenary purposes. And this is, I think, a clear reference to what Pakistan has been doing. So a good one for India. Apart from this, I think the mood has been largely positive. While India has shown its desire to work with partner countries, including China, and is working on a cautious reset, India has also been able to establish its own unique position when it comes to terrorism, of course, and even multilateralism. While Xi Jinping spoke about multilateralism and Cold War mentality and how it will not find takers in today's world, it was a dig at the West, and they're talking about the larger SCO ideology. But India is focusing on implementation. India is focusing on reform, perform, transform. Those were the words that the Prime Minister used. India is talking about global governance and execution and delivery. So there is a distinction there in how India is projecting it, while the Chinese side is looking at this forum as a larger sales pitch for the BRI. India focused on the north-south corridor and connectivity and not debt traps. So I think it's a very, very interesting, nuanced and clear position and iteration of India's position on how the world needs to move forward. We need to look for alternatives, but alternatives that work for everyone and not just a few players.
The Prime Minister said, Palki, the connectivity at the cost of sovereignty erodes trust and efficiency. So was that an open message to China on the BRI and CPEC?
I would say it was. It was a very clear message. India is not a signatory to BRI, and that was one of the points of sticking points between India and China, leading up to which we saw the Doklam clash in 2017. So yes, BRI has been a point of contention, and the Indian side has once again reaffirmed its position. Remember, this is also a different China from 2017, Anand. This is a China that is not seeing the kind of growth that it would like to see. This is a China where the top leadership is also coming under some sort of pressure, where the property sector is in decline. They have a bunch of challenges, and the American relationship is also in the doldrums, even though they've got some sort of a reprieve on the tariff front. So this is a China that is very keen to work with India, and you see that in the press coverage here. We saw the China Daily. President Xi Jinping had multiple bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the summit, but only one meeting made it to the front page, and that was the meeting with Prime Minister Modi. So it's as important for China as for India, and we're seeing that in the approach of the Chinese side, in the way they're engaging and I would say that accommodating India's position and concerns.
Now, what is being made of this interaction, the trilateral interaction? Talks of a trilateral agreement or a conversation and a meet soon is being talked about, RIC conversation, although Bharat is saying there is still a long way to go. But as said, Bharat and China are part of the solution. I'm very clearly saying that he's leaning on them to resolve the Ukraine issue than anybody else.
I think Peter Navarro basically exposes America's lack of understanding of people advising them. But that said, on the larger Ukraine issue, the two parties involved in this conflict, Russia and Ukraine, are constantly engaging with India. The Ukrainian president called Prime Minister Modi just ahead of his bilateral with President Putin here in Tianjin. And that shows that the parties that really matter, the parties which are part of the conflict directly, are confident of India's position. And India's position has been consistent throughout, that this is not an era of war, that solutions cannot be found on the battlefield, and both sides need to sit together and talk. At the same time, India is not taking sides that would suit the Western agenda. India is on the side of what is right, and that is something that India has expressed consistently and repeatedly. In fact, in the run-up to the Alaska meeting, President Putin briefed Prime Minister Modi. Then we had conversation between Zelensky and Prime Minister Modi. Again, President Putin and Prime Minister Modi. So both sides have kept India updated about where this is going. I think the American intervention at this point is just a lot of surround sound and noise.
Important that Prime Minister Narendra Modi and a lot of the other leaders, including President Xi Jinping, talked about bullying, and they've also talked about reforms, UN reforms. Now the charter has also said, reaffirming the importance of establishing an SCO development bank. The interested member states decided to establish it and intensify consultations on a range of issues related to the functioning of this financial institution. This is significant, Palke, because President Xi Jinping has been pushing for this for a while. The UN reforms, and that the SCO can become the template for the UN for reform, and member states can push for UN reforms. There's also been a word on the rules and principles of the WTO, damaging the interests of international security, including its food and energy components, negatively affecting the global economy, undermining fair competition, hindering international cooperation, and the achievement of UN SDGs. Members oppose unilateral coercive measures, including those of an economic nature that contravene UN Charter and other norms of international law. So this is again somewhere highlighting that there are major reforms that are going to be pushed by this consortium of nations, along with perhaps a heft of the Global South and the Africa group of nations, perhaps.
I would say there are two parts to this. One, of course, India has been part of the growing group of countries that are looking at exploring alternatives to a dollar-led global economy. That is very much a fact. It won't be easy. It won't happen overnight. But if this is how America chooses to proceed with its partners and rivals, then this is going to happen at some point. And we've seen in the past that Donald Trump has clearly targeted the BRICS. He's not said very much about the SCO. Post this, I'm waiting to see what sort of statements come from the White House and how do they choose to target or not target this group. That is one. And this is the direction in which the world is heading for sure. But on the point of UN reform, I would like to say that for India, UN reform would start by widening the number of permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. And there is one roadblock for India in that group, and that is China. So when a group like the SCO, which with China as central to it, talks about UN reform, then they need to walk the talk. Then they need to make sure that UN reform happens in every way, and not just in ways that suit China. When China shields Pakistan on terrorism at the United Nations, when China vetoes moves against Pakistan at the United Nations, so that should also be a part of UN reform. So I think India would take it with a pinch of salt that yes, we need UN reform. I think everybody agrees with the larger idea, but are you ready to push for the reform and work towards it, even on issues which do not suit your larger agenda? That is something that needs to be seen.
Well, but Bharat has a position on the veto powers itself that only 5 nations cannot control, and especially when they are not even the top 5 economies of the world, a lot of them are not as significant geopolitically as some of the other nations. Should we even have veto powers? Finally, interesting pictures. Last evening, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and let's just go to those pictures and get Padki to weigh in and our guests before we have to close or take a break before the top of the hour. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, President Xi Jinping walk past Shabbash Sharif. And then you have President Putin and Prime Minister Narendra Modi walking past Shabbash Sharif. So suddenly has Pakistan just become a blur there? Or does everyone now realize that Shabbash Sharif is not the man worth engaging with?
Well, the second point I would add more weight to, that Shabbash Sharif is a placeholder, really. And the Chinese know this more than anyone else. They've been engaging with Pakistan for the longest time. It is virtually a vassal state for Beijing. At the same time, they know that they can choose to ignore Shabbash Sharif at a platform like this and yet engage with them because the money for Pakistan comes from China, the development aid comes from China, the diplomatic cover comes from China, the weapons come from China. So Shabbash Sharif will wait his turn if he has to, but it does send for us looking at it from India, it makes for very interesting viewing, and that is how Pakistan is being treated. But I think beyond that, we have to look at the larger point that Pakistan and China do have what they call an iron brotherhood, and that is not being diluted. In fact, China has invested in Pakistan so that India faces a two-front challenge militarily and in terms of security. And I underline these points, Anand, because while we're looking at these two countries working together and we're talking, all headlines are speaking about a reset, it's very important to bear in mind that the fault lines very much remain, and a reset cannot erase history. And we need to proceed with caution. We need to make the most of what this opportunity gives us. But we need to bear in the back of our minds that this is still China and we've burnt our fingers here before.
True, and it is to collaborate where we need to, cooperate where we want to, and confront where we have to. I think those three C's have to be there when it comes to China, and Bharat needs to follow that map and that strategy going forward. Let's hope we've all wisened up in terms of how to deal with this nation that also had the foresight to re-engage with Bharat and perhaps looked ahead to saying that there are going to be troubles and there are going to be headwinds and the region needs to cooperate better. Palki, thank you for your inputs. Good to have you there in Tianjin along with Rahul Shivshankar. We're going to take a very, very short break on our coverage. When we come back, we'll have more guests and continuous conversation. So that's the picture. Shabbash Sharif, perhaps in Pakistan politics, is irrelevant. These two people, most relevant. President and Prime Minister Narendra Modi sitting together in the same vehicle ahead of the scheduled bilateral, or have the conversations already begun? Very, very important conversation. And the messaging is loud and clear. Someone in the Oval Office is watching and there will be a reaction. For every utterance that is coming out from the Oval Office, there is a picture that is the response. Not words, but deeds, and perhaps moments like these. Stay with us.
Brought to you by this is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
हमारे शानदार स्वागत और आतिथ्य सत्कार के लिए मैं राष्ट्रपति श्री का हार्दिक आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। आज उज्बेकिस्तान का इंडिपेंडेंस डे है। कल किर्गिस्तान का राष्ट्रीय दिवस था। इस अवसर पर मैं दोनों लीडर्स को बधाई और शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, पिछले 24 वर्षों में SCO का पूरे यूरेशिया क्षेत्र की एक्सटेंडेड फैमिली को जोड़ने में बहुत महत्वपूर्ण योगदान रहा। भारत ने एक सक्रिय सदस्य के रूप में हमेशा कंस्ट्रक्टिव और सकारात्मक भूमिका निभाई है। SCO को लेकर
test. Let's see if these countries walk the talk.
It certainly is. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. Let's see if that plays out the way India is hoping and has been, campaigning for and lobbying for a number of years. Now, Rahul, we'll come back to you as and when that bilateral meeting begins. We were expecting that to happen at around 9:45 India time. It's been an hour and a half, so it's been delayed. But you could see the images of this is where the meeting is going to happen between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi. It's an important, very, very consequential bilateral meeting, not least because Trump and his policies have really sort of tied India in to becoming a stakeholder, if you will, in getting peace in Ukraine. He has basically said that until India puts pressure on Russia, people like Navarro even going to the extent of saying that it's Modi's war. And the statement that he made overnight, which has now gone viral this morning here in India, saying that Brahmins are profiting, it's not just inaccurate, factually wrong. It is absolutely insulting, and it is in a way poking your finger in the internal affairs of India. Such a person has no business talking about what's going on in India, and even as a slight, even as an insult, that is something that is extremely, extremely gravely offensive, no doubt about it. So the picture on your left of Prime Minister and President Putin sharing a car ride to the venue where the bilateral will happen. And in the bilateral, once the cameras go away, there will be substantive conversations on what is President Putin's vision, what is his timeline as far as getting peace in Ukraine is concerned. Because willy-nilly, like I said, the secondary tariffs, the oil tariffs that have been imposed in India are linked to Russia moving towards a path of peace in Ukraine, whether we like it or not. You could call it unfair, and that's what the MEA has said. It's unfair, it's unjustified, it's unreasonable, all of which is true. But at the same time, it is also a reality that India needs to get rid of the oil tariffs. All right, these are the pictures of both the leaders entering the car. You can see a Russian journalist there shooting this, and in the background, you can see both the leaders walking together. President Putin offering the car ride, and then Prime Minister Modi hopping in to President Putin's cavalcade, and then both of them riding off to the venue where the bilateral will happen. I want to now open this up to our guests. Anil Trigonath is a former diplomat. Lieutenant General S.L. Narasimhan is joining us, former member of the National Security Advisory Board, and here in our studios, former General Officer Commanding of the 15 Corps, Lieutenant General D.P. Pandey is here in our studios. Ambassador Trigonath, I'll start with you. I mean, I asked this to my colleagues in Tianjin as well, that look, optics do matter in diplomacy. Pictures speak 1,000 words, more so in your profession, in your world. How will these pictures be viewed? Are they being seen as a fundamental reset of ties in this part of the world between Russia, India, and China? Or are they just being consumed for the optics that are emanating from Tianjin? Will they be viewed in Washington, in London, in Berlin, etc., as a significant reset of ties, or merely just diplomatic optics that happen on the sidelines of a summit?
Well, thank you, Zaka. In fact, as far as Russia and India are concerned, or President Putin and Prime Minister Modi are concerned, this is no optics. This is very clearly a very substantive, powerful, strategic partnership, which has been in display all along, not from now alone. The fact that the way they were bantering with each other, walking with each other hand in hand, and the three of them were also talking at one time, conveyed a message, very clear message. And this is not the first time that President Putin and Prime Minister Modi are traveling together. If you remember, during Prime Minister Modi's visit to Sochi, even though it was a short visit, President Putin drove him personally around in the car for nearly, and spent about 10.5 hours with Prime Minister Modi. So they share a very tremendous understanding and bond and mutual respect for each other, which is what was on display here. So as far as Russia and India are concerned, I can say that it is no optics. Nobody has to read. All the Western countries, including the United States, understand that. Even Trump himself wants to be very pally with Putin, as we have seen it in Alaska and elsewhere. So it is not that this is going to really cause them any star. However, the relationship which is improving now between India and China, that is something that will naturally bring about concern there in that case. And all three getting together, not in a bloc formation, which has, of course, been very clearly conveyed in the statement also, declaration that was issued, that this is not a bloc. So this is something that is being said here, and that is very important because India does not believe in blocs or anything anti-West or something like that. These are passing phases in every history. We have a passing phase in the US relationship, but I personally feel that what happened between India and the US is actually should be a great eye-opening for us. That dependence on the United States is totally unreliable and can be untrustworthy. They have been always trying to undermine our strategic interests very often, even though saying something different, because we know about what China is. We know about others. But with the United States, if you thought that democracy and also that has all been, so I think it's come as a blessing in disguise. And Peter Navarro type of people are actually cementing that perception.
Okay,
and that is
so let me ask, there might be impediments, General Pandey is here in our studio, there might be impediments and limits, let's say, not impediments, but more limits to the coming together of Russia, India, China. But for now, given the context of the, really troublesome times that we're having with the United States, particularly with the Trump administration, when you have leaders of three big countries meeting like this, there is shared bonhomie, there is a degree of conviviality between the three of them. It may not amount to much. It's optics, no doubt about it, but optics do matter in diplomacy. How and why do you think this is important?
I think I must accept one point that Prime Minister Modi, since the time last about a decade and all, his approach to engage with foreign leaders has been warm, effusive. He stepped across. He's changed the paradigm of how leaders engage with other leaders. So that is one thing which he has done. But the response which comes out, like the similar response was there in the first Trump 1.0. But this time, post-Operation Sindoor, something has flipped. And unfortunate that Trump has lost the narrative with India. And what is happening, I'll just keep it aside. But this optics is something very significant because two top leaders of the world today are traveling in the same vehicle in a third country. Right? It makes a huge impact. And look at the contradictions. The contradictions are, on one side, the Trump and his the sidekicks are calling for India as perpetuating or feeding into the Russian-Ukraine war. Whereas Russia and Ukraine are having a different voice and chatter on the subject. Zelensky has spoken to Prime Minister Modi at least 3 times. And just prior to his arrival here, he's had a long conversation to urge him to possibly allow for peace to prevail. So, and the release of this information which has come about, the diesel going out to Ukraine, is another major message. So you look at the whole thing that today Putin in his message, he is the only person, possibly leader, who's used the SCO platform to make a conversation about possibly America on this subject, that he's talking of the country should not interfere into, security of other countries and such like statement. So I think he's complimented India and China for trying to, resolve the conflict proactively. So these are contradictions which are happening. I guess somewhere the Trump administration needs to actually have a hard look that where are they going wrong. And this SCO meeting was decided a long time back.
Correct.
But the kind of effort this time Chinese have gone through in last about 3 to 4 months to ensure that Prime Minister Modi comes and attends this thing, and the coverage which has come about into the newspapers. In fact, the only bilateral which has been talked about, there have been multiple bilateral or Z with other countries, this thing. The photographs and the conversations have come out in the front page of this thing. So I think this is one of the rare times where the countries are proactively engaging India to come about. But the sensible posturing which the country has done today is that there are no negative comments, only symbolic messaging which is going out, this, on various tweets and stuff like that.
So if I can ask General Narasimhan, I agree with General Pandey. Obviously, the messaging that's come out, the statements that have come out from the Chinese side, even the Indian side yesterday after the bilateral, very, very positive, very, very encouraging, no doubt about it. And frankly, if these 3 countries come together, and there was this postulation of an RIC, or a Russia, India, China, RIC, as it was called, a subgroup within BRICS, to come together. If that were to actually happen, it will be a significant, groundbreaking shift in diplomacy. But at the end of the day, General Narasimhan, there are inherent contradictions also, and inherent limits to how far India and China can come together, how far India and Russia can come together. How would you characterize what's happening in Tianjin right now? Is it a significant reset, or is it sending out a message at a time of great global flux that India is not deprived of partners, it is not tied to the West in any form or fashion, that it can choose to be friends with Russia at the same time? The president of Ukraine is calling the Prime Minister of India, saying that please, when you have the conversation with the president of Russia, please impress upon him to move towards the path of peace. So clearly, India is also showing that we're not tied to any camp, and we can choose to be friends with whoever we want to be friends with.
Thank you very much, Zaka, for getting me on your show. I think you're absolutely right. The thing that we need to look at is, I want to put a little bit of caution in all this positive statement that are coming out at this point in time. The reason is, if you look at the statement that came out from India and China after the bilateral meeting yesterday, I hardly find anything new in those statements. So all the 3 mutuals were mentioned, border was mentioned, everything else was mentioned. And similarly, the Chinese also have been mentioning the same thing that they've been saying from earlier. So I don't see a sense of something new that has happened in this bilateral meeting that has come up. So basic thing is, both the sides have stated their position. there is some forward movement. People-to-people contacts can increase. 75th anniversary of the diplomatic relationship is coming this year, and so therefore some activities will take place. So these are actually cautious steps moving forward. All the same, it is a step moving forward. That is how I think I will see the India-China bilateral meeting that took place. I've not been able to read the joint statement as yet, but one of the headlines that is coming up is that SCO has been able to condemn the terrorism as a subject.
Yeah.
Which actually was indicated when Mr. Wang Yi came here. And if you look at the foreign ministry statement immediately after that, they had mentioned that Mr. Jaishankar has raised this in a strong manner with Mr. Wang Yi, and Mr. Wang Yi had accepted that it should be condemned in all forms of terrorism. So I think that is a move forward. Coming to this photographs and all which are coming up of the three leaders coming up, etc. If you look at the meeting yesterday, when Mr. Modi came in, when Mr. Putin came in and met Mr. Xi Jinping and his wife, you find there's a conversation going on between Mr. Xi Jinping and Mr. Putin. Whereas all other leaders just shook hands, took a photograph, and then moved on. Today, this other photographs have come up where all the three leaders are meeting together and spending some time together. So there is definitely a move forward to indicate the kind of cooperation that all the three countries are willing to do on the issues of natural interest, mutual interest for them. So that is something that we need to keep in mind. The other thing is about the Russia, Ukraine, and Mr. Zelensky's call, which General Pandey mentioned. This has actually been happening for a long period of time. If you take your mind back, Mr. Modi spoke to Mr. Putin as well as to Mr. Zelensky. So this is something which has been going on, and India has been maintaining that war is not the way, diplomacy is the way, talks are the way. That I think is the message that is getting pushed by India even in these meetings. I think this is the way I see this entire thing happening. Like there is a message which is going out to US that is definitely there. But the point is, as General Pandey mentioned, this meeting was decided 1 year ago.
Mm-hmm.
When this meeting will take place, the movement of the relationship between India and China has been going on for the last about 1 year since we signed the agreement in October 24. So these are all actually things in progress. But I think they are coming to some kind of a culmination here, and a move forward can be expected from this. On the RIC, I think we need to have our expectations a little calmer. Basically, because RIC is a loose kind of an organization, it doesn't have a formal structure. So this is something that I think we need to take it with a bit of caution. I think we have been actually in the RIC. There have been, I think, since 2018 and 19, there have been no RIC meetings have been held. Yeah. So there have been efforts to restart this process. So that process we'll have to wait and watch as to how this progresses.
No, for China, Ambassador Trigonet, this would be a big coup, because China is very clear in its head about its foreign policy that if there is any great power competition that is going on in the world right now, it is with the United States. It's between China and the United States. They already have Russia sort of in their corner. India, they always considered to be in the American corner. They were very wary about things like Quad, etc. And now, given what India and the US are going through over the last 3-4 months because of the tariffs, the extremely almost hostile statements that are coming out of various aides in the White House, the likes of Besant and Navarro and so on, they would be happy to sort of price out India from the US camp. And even if India is a neutral party, which is not, either in the US camp or in the Chinese camp, the Chinese would consider that to be a bit of a coup. Ambassador Gurnat.
Well, I don't think so that they will consider it a coup. They definitely have been also wanting. You see, let's say both policies of India and China, in my view, are very similar in many ways. One is China wants to keep some kind of a peace for about 20 years so that it is able to displace the United States from being number one. And India wants to have these 20 years of peaceful times to become the developed country by 2047.
Yeah.
So similar policies. So basically, both are attempting to have some kind of a peace and tranquility. The Chinese misadventure has failed and flopped, and therefore they have decided that there's no point continuing on that path of friction. And this is what happened in Kazan eventually. After Kazan, we have seen that the frequency of interactions between the Indian leaders and the Chinese leaders has been quite significant. And there have been step-by-step approaches that have happened. In fact, just a few days ago, before this meeting, we have the WMCC and then the special representatives meeting between NSA. Now, at that time, it was very clearly institutional mechanisms have been outlined to deal with the border issue, how we are going to resolve it, how we are going to solve it, which are the kind of experts group will meet. So, which has been halted for a very long time now. So this is something I believe is definitely a desire. Secondly, both of them understand that Trump is an aberration in the US politics. So it is not that India is going to just jump over with happiness towards China or not. We will have to be very vigilant now. Chinese have shown their teeth. The Americans have shown their teeth. So now we have to see how we are going to grit along these kind of equations that are going to emerge.
Okay. I'm going to take a break. When I come back, I'll come to General Pandey as well as General Narasimhan. You know, we did see some significant statements. For the first time, for example, in yesterday's statement after the bilateral meeting, both sides referred to India and China as partners, not rivals. I thought that was a significant statement. But at the end of the day, as my colleague Rahul Shivshankar was saying a moment ago, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So you've had the first step, which is disengagement at the border. But what about the next two steps? De-escalation and eventually de-induction. You still have 50,000 troops on either side of the line of actual control. That is not a normal relationship. You need the armies to go back to their barracks, as it were pre-2020, pre-Galwan. Do we have a roadmap for that? Do we have some concrete details in that direction? Or is this situation going to continue beyond, you know, the flowery language that we saw in the joint statement as well?
SCO का पूरे यूरेशिया क्षेत्र की एक्सटेंडेड फैमिली को जोड़ने में बहुत महत्वपूर्ण योगदान रहा। भारत ने एक सक्रिय सदस्य के रूप में हमेशा कंस्ट्रक्टिव और सकारात्मक भूमिका निभाई है। SCO को लेकर भारत की सोच और नीति तीन मुख्य स्तंभों पर आधारित है। SCO, S सिक्योरिटी, C कनेक्टिविटी, O अपॉर्चुनिटी। पहले स्तंभ S यानी सिक्योरिटी के संदर्भ में मैं कहना चाहता हूं कि सुरक्षा।
Welcome back. We're still in conversation with our guests on some significant developments coming out of Tianjin, China, on the SCO summit. I want to ask General Pandey here, you know, we saw significant statements both yesterday after the bilateral between India and China and today again at the SCO when the declaration has been adopted. But beyond the statements, you know, India and China don't have a normal relationship. We still have troops on either side of the LAC. There were agreements of 93, 96, which were violated by China. What is this new normal that we are moving towards?
So please let's draw reference to the engagement between the Americans and Soviet Union and thereafter with Russia. While they kept on fighting for space, controlling, you know, the space which was required to be managed for their security considerations, their trade continued to increase. Like Americans, when they are engaging with the Chinese, the trade continues to go along. The Taiwanese have got invested so much in China, so is Japan, so is Philippines. So when you are actually engaged, you need to look at the interest of 1.4 billion people rather than get stuck onto the boundary question. But yes, internal politics drives that you need to keep on harping on resolution of border situation. Similarly, if you're going to stall talks and trade because somebody is giving weapons and support to the Pakistanis who are actually in contest with us, possibly we'll be hemmed that we will not be able to sell our defense industrial product to anybody in the world, right? Can India go towards an isolation? It's not possible. So I think what the Prime Minister is trying to do is manage the issue of the border subject. We have gone quite ahead. You know, after 5 years, after nearly 4 years, we are able to carry out disengagement. To say that de-escalation and de-induction will happen immediately is a matter of a debate, because I think we have lost total trust in what Chinese are capable of. Therefore, for us to actually trust them is going to be very difficult immediately. It'll take some time to happen. But are we going to stall the trade fair?
Have been approved for investments in India. So there is a process that is being followed. We never stop the entire thing. But the problem is that we need to actually, like General Pandey mentioned, we are dependent on China for many of our industries requirements. That we need to actually ensure that we get it from them. Therefore, we need to actually have that relationship also simultaneously going. Tunnel boring machines, fertilizers, and things like that is something that we have been saying for a very long time. Plus, the entry of our companies into China has been a major problem, which Chinese have been saying that they will facilitate it, but they have not done it so far. So the proof of the pudding is in eating. The statements have come out, which is very good. Ultimately, we will have to wait and watch as to how they translate on ground. That is extremely very important.
Okay.
In any case, we are not making the resolution of the boundary question as a prerequisite. It is the peace and tranquility along the line of control that is a prerequisite.
And to that extent, I mean, to be fair to both sides, after Galwan in the last 5 years, no shots have been fired. Since certainly, post-June of 2020, no shots have been fired. So there is a degree of peace and tranquility. But is it normalcy? No, it is not. We'll take a break. And when we come back, I want to take this forward because, look, what the pictures coming out of Tianjin will be viewed very, very closely in Washington, in Berlin, in London, in Paris, at a time when everyone is trying to move the needle towards a certain degree of peace in Ukraine. The Ukrainians want it. The Americans want it. That's why President Trump had the summit in Alaska with President Putin. President Putin has his own calculations as to the pace at which he wants to move towards peace and what are the conditions that need to be met before the peace agreement can be signed. And India, willy-nilly, whether we like it or not, President Trump, because of his unjustified and unreasonable oil tariffs, has made India a stakeholder in ensuring that there is a degree of peace between Russia and Ukraine. We'll talk about that on the other side as we await this bilateral meeting between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi, which was due to begin at 9:45. It's been delayed by almost 2 hours now. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, hopefully we'll have first pictures and first details of that bilateral meeting between the two leaders.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
हमारे शानदार स्वागत और आतिथ्य सत्कार के लिए मैं राष्ट्रपति श्री का हार्दिक आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। आज उज्बेकिस्तान का इंडिपेंडेंस डे है। कल किर्गिस्तान का राष्ट्रीय दिवस था। इस अवसर पर मैं दोनों लीडर्स को बधाई और शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, पिछले 24 वर्षों SCO का पूरे यूरेशिया क्षेत्र की एक्सटेंडेड फैमिली को जोड़ने में बहुत महत्वपूर्ण योगदान रहा। भारत ने एक सक्रिय सदस्य के रूप में हमेशा कंस्ट्रक्टिव और सकारात्मक भूमिका निभाई है। SCO को लेकर भारत की सोच और नीति 3 मुख्य स्तंभों पर आधारित है। SCO, S security, C connectivity, O opportunity। पहले स्तंभ S यानी सिक्योरिटी के संदर्भ में मैं कहना चाहता हूं कि सुरक्षा, शांति और स्थिरता किसी भी देश के विकास का आधार है। किंतु इस मार्ग में आतंकवाद, अलगाववाद और अतिवाद बड़ी चुनौतियां हैं। आतंकवाद से हम चाबहार को और इंटरनेशनल नॉर्थ साउथ ट्रांसपोर्ट कॉरिडोर जैसे इनिशिएटिव पर काम कर रहे हैं। इनसे हम अफगानिस्तान और मध्य एशिया के साथ संपर्क बढ़ा सकते हैं। Connectivity that bypasses sovereignty, losing trust and meaning.
Brought to you. This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
हमारे शानदार स्वागत और आतिथ्य सत्कार के लिए मैं राष्ट्रपति श्री का हार्दिक आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। आज उज्बेकिस्तान का इंडिपेंडेंस डे है। कल किर्गिस्तान का राष्ट्रीय दिवस था। इस अवसर पर मैं दोनों लीडर्स को बधाई और शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, पिछले 24 वर्षों SCO का पूरे यूरेशिया क्षेत्र की एक्सटेंडेड फैमिली को जोड़ने में बहुत महत्वपूर्ण योगदान रहा। भारत ने एक सक्रिय सदस्य के रूप में हमेशा कंस्ट्रक्टिव और सकारात्मक भूमिका निभाई है। SCO को लेकर भारत की सोच और नीति 3 मुख्य स्तंभों पर आधारित है। SCO, S security, C connectivity, O opportunity। पहले स्तंभ S यानी सिक्योरिटी के संदर्भ में मैं कहना चाहता हूं कि सुरक्षा, शांति और स्थिरता किसी भी देश के विकास का आधार है। किंतु इस मार्ग में आतंकवाद, अलगाववाद और अतिवाद।
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of the big SCO summit in Tianjin. The SCO countries have unanimously adopted a declaration which condemns the Pahalgam attack of April 22nd. But the images from this morning, Prime Minister Modi, President Putin of Russia, walking past other leaders on the stage, including Pakistani Prime Minister Shabbash Sharif, and then reached the end of the stage where the three have delayed by a couple of hours. What's on the agenda? What's on the talks table this morning for both leaders?
Well, there are 3 or 4 issues. Of course, Ukraine is going to take center stage. We've already had a call between President Zelensky of Ukraine and, of course, the Indian Prime Minister in the lead up to this, where they talked about trying to get India to interlocute on behalf of the West. So that is one definitive pillar of that meeting. The other, of course, is a re-emphasizing and cementing of the trade relationship between the two countries. There are acres of room still for improving that trade relationship in a manner that it becomes more balanced. Over the last couple of years, the shift in the trade relationship has been markedly in favor of Russia, because India has been purchasing fuel from Russia at a huge amount of fuel from Russia at a level that it hasn't been in the past. So clearly there's an imbalance there, and that has to be reset. There's already a commitment that has come from Lavrov in the run-up to this meeting, if you remember, Zaka, where it was explicitly stated that the Russians would open their markets to Indian products. So as India looks to diversify its trade, Moscow is going to be a big market. And of course, the continued optics that we're seeing are going to feed into this meeting. There's going to be talk about regional cooperation, solidarity, and of course, enhancing the strategic and security relationship. So those three big ticket issues going to be occupying center stage in that conversation. But what is very interesting is that the two leaders decided to ride in that automobile that belongs to President Putin. You've got visuals of that. And they left the SCO venue for the Ritz-Carlton, which is a significant gap, about 15-20 minutes, even at the speed at which one of those cars travel, and had a one-on-one. So when I sort of prompted my contacts in the MEA, they said, no one has a clue. The dynamics there clearly overshadowing at this moment, and the suspense will be brought into the room. The delegates are there, and I'm trying to get information as to who is there from the Russian side, being told that that news will be available. Yes, I've got that news. It's Manturov, Peskov, Lavrov are the three people who are there right now. Obviously, Lavrov is a familiar figure, not only globally, but also in India. The other two are important aides of President Putin and individuals who are close advisors in that cabinet of his. So these are the three men who matter, who are in that room. The Indian side represented by pretty much the same troika that was there talking to President Xi. So very interesting conversation. The NSA is, of course, very intrinsically involved in the relationship with Russia, as you know, Zaka, because it is a relationship that dates back to a time when the NSA had a huge influence in building ties in a previous avatar, as you know, with Russia. So there is continuity there. The leaders, of course, been in power for considerable part of a decade. Therefore, they have an equation. And you saw the visual representation in form of this sort of bonhomie, which has crossed a lot of unexpected lines. I don't think anyone thought that the two would be traveling together to the venue of this meeting. And what has transpired in that car, no one knows. It's very reminiscent. If we can just split the screen and bring out those pictures of Trump and Putin in the beast, as it says. I mean, there are such similes there. So clearly, a sign is being sent to Washington, D.C. that, look, your tyranny, tariff tyranny, your attempt to arm twist these two players has not worked. You've got to think of something else. And don't forget, as we entered this Tianjin moment, so to speak, 2 days ago, we were reporting that Putin had given an interview to Xinhua, where he had talked about the importance of BRICS as a superstructure which would articulate the South-South voice and its agenda. And then in his own SCO speech, in that plenary speech, he credited China and India for playing a major role in bringing some amount of stability as well as
all right, Rahul, just give me a moment. We have the live pictures
larger
now
architecture of the talks
of the meeting that has just begun. You can see the Prime Minister making his opening comments, President Putin making his opening comments. We're showing this full frame now. The meeting has just begun. We have the first pictures. I'm not sure we have the audio on this. If we do, I think we should play up the audio. But yeah, there is no audio as of now, but I'm sure we will get that in a few moments from now. So you can see a line of officials on either table, on either side of the two tables, of course, led by the two principals. That's Prime Minister Modi on the Indian side and President Putin on the Russian side. You can see the National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, to the Prime Minister's right, followed by the Indian ambassador to the Russian Federation. On the Russian side, Mr. Manturov is the first Deputy Prime Minister of Russia. Mr. Sergei Lavrov, of course, a familiar figure here in India, the Foreign Minister of Russia, and Mr. Dmitry Peskov, who is the spokesman of the... All right, let's listen.